Chapter 45, Meeting an Old Friend in a Foreign Land. Lying on the fragrant bed, his fingers subconsciously stroking over the smooth silk surface, Fan Xian was still digesting what his father had said earlier. Although he knew that he was bound to run into some troublesome things after coming to the capital, he really hadn't expected things to be so troublesome. Before he left just now, he had been prepared to ask his father about the matter of the Liu clan sending someone to poison him 4 years ago, but on second thought, there were perhaps many dirty things in the high families that were hidden under that kind of fat and powder, and it would be of little use if he tried to forcefully tear them apart. After all, in the previous conversation, he could feel that this father, whom he had met for the first time, had a few genuine feelings for himself. It seemed that the reason he had sent himself to Tangyu in the first place was because the enemy who had killed his mother was still in Kyoto. Thinking of this, a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Was he really going to marry that very sick woman? At this moment, it seemed that it was rather himself who was using his trickster mind on that little girl surnamed Lin. It seemed like it was really a very poor little girl. He decided to find a chance to go and see that Lin family lady, and having made this decision, his gaze resumed to fall on the long, narrow chest that was casually resting on the corner of the wall, a little curious as to where that key could be. True Qi flowed slowly. The cultivation that had stopped for dozens of days due to the journey began silently again. In the moment before entering meditation, Fan Xian thought of his father whom he had first met, and countless questions welled up in his heart. When Fan Xian tossed and turned in the Fan residence in Kyoto for the first time, Senanbo Fan Jian was also fuming in his study. This was the first time in 16 years that he had seen Fan Xian, and seeing that clean and beautiful face, Fan Jian fell into some sort of reminiscence for a long time, unable to extricate himself from it, and muttered, "Little Leaf, your child has grown up, and it's true that, just like you back then, he is so young, but he looks like he knows everything. Chen Pingping is still against him coming to the capital, so I took advantage of his vacation to call the idle child back to Kyoto, and someone has assured me that the Yi family's estate will definitely return to his hands." The light shone on the middle-aged man's solemn face as he said softly, "Don't worry, no one has dared to harm him yet within the kingdom of Qing." The light of the sky spread down through the shadows of the clouds, sometimes bright and sometimes dull, and the old trees on both sides of the road drew out new branches, swaying gently in the wind. It was already late spring, and the small lotus in the lakes at the foot of the mountains were showing their first appearance of blue and tender. Fan house carriage in the road slowly forward, before and after the guards, looks quite a bit of momentum. Fan Xian half closed his eyes. Ruo was carefully peeling off the skin of the loquat, and then brought the slightly sweet and sour flesh to his brother's lips. Fan Xian opened his mouth and swallowed it in one gulp, so sour that he hastily gulped a few times. Fan Xian looked at this scene with a face full of incredulity and horror. His own 15-year-old sister, who was skilled in chess, chain, calligraphy, and painting, and was a great talent among the upper class in Kyoto, always with her eyes high above the ground, like an iceberg that wouldn't melt, and who made countless talented and noble people wail and sigh would actually serve that guy named Fan Xian with such small-mindedness, and would actually peel loquats for him with her own hands. Fan Ruo didn't even know that the look of adoration she had on her face as she looked at her elder brother had fallen without a trace in her brother's eyes. She just subconsciously wanted to make her brother comfortable, because she thought that her brother had been in Tangyu State for more than 10 years and thought that he had suffered a lot, and this time it was not easy for him to enter the capital, but he was going to marry the Lin family's young lady. In the eyes of the young girl, there was no woman in the world who could really be worthy of her own brother, not to mention that Ms. Lin's body is now the young girl's eyes. There is no woman in the world who is truly worthy of her brother, not to mention the fact that Miss Lin's body is now in that state. Although now in Kyoto, the Fan family Miss Talent has long been spread far and wide, but in her own heart, she is still the same in the Tangyu State mansion, listening to ghost stories of the little girl. She is the only one who knows that her own brother has 10,000 poems in his chest. As for what Chao Gong and Su Wang. Fan Ruo thought of this, smiled slightly and looked at her brother in front of her, thinking that obviously you are talented. Why are you refusing to let yourself tell others? Fan Xian also enjoys the warmth of brother and sister, half-closed eyes, also know that his sister has long guessed that the stone record and other articles are his own writing, just thinking about some other issues. The situation of the Fan family in Kyoto is different from what he expected before entering the capital. At least Lu seems to have learned a lesson from the incident 4 years ago, so now very peaceful. And that rumored exceptionally brutal playboy brother also seems to be very obedient to Ruoro's discipline, also does not let himself particularly unbearable place. The family is still quite happy. Fan Sijia was looking at Fan Xian's face with curiosity. He admitted that this half-brother was much better looking than himself, but he still strongly believed that in the Fan family, only he was the real young master, and this one in front of him was just an outsider. But when he thought of his own sister, the one who had always been as light as a chrysanthemum, the one he had always admired immensely, actually worshipped Fan Xian so much, Fan Sijia was a bit puzzled, thinking, could it be that this one called Fan Xian really had something very remarkable about him? No one on this street has dared to mess with me yet. The proud Fan Sijia looked at the guy in front of him, who was 4 years older than himself, and said arrogantly, "You've only just come to the capital, so I'll show you around for 2 days." Fan Xian lazily half leaned back on the soft cushion and heard this and puffed out a laugh. He originally wanted his sister to take him to see the scenery of Kyoto, but he couldn't have expected that Fan Sijia, his younger brother, would actually arrive uninvited and insist on staying on the carriage. "Hey, I say little guy, why must you follow us?" he asked Fan Sijia. Fan Sijia yelled, "Don't call me little guy, I'm the official young master of the Fan family." Fan Xian wondered, "Don't you think you'll look like you have no standards if you yell like that? Even if you're afraid of me competing for your family fortune, you should still play something shady." He touched his brother's head and continued with a smile, "It's better to learn more from your mom." Fan Sijia looked at this beautiful face on the slightly shy smile, somehow, but for no reason scared up, the body shrinks back, hide behind Fan Ruoro, thinking that this guy is also too eccentric how to speak so recklessly. Speaking, the carriage came to a lively place in Kyoto. At this time is the noon, the street pedestrian quite a lot, the road on both sides of the restaurant open to welcome customers, yo drink sound and with the aroma of food into the curtain and come, induced the Fan Si-che yell to eat. Fuji Zijing went into the restaurant to make a reservation, while Fan Si-che and Fan Ruorua, under the protection of a few guards, went to a street-side food stall to buy noodles. Fan Xian, however, half squatted and looked at the decorations on the corridors and pillars below the restaurant, scared and wondered at the magnificent brushwork, the dots of gold and colors, dazzling and unusual, completely different from what he had seen in the books in his previous life. The 2 guards were some distance away from him, secretly looking around. At this very moment, a middle-aged woman dressed in ordinary clothes, holding a baby, grinding over like a thief, lowered her voice and asked, "Want a book?" They're all the ones that the 8 divisions haven't vetted and approved. This scene made Fan Xian feel familiar, warm, and touched with a sense of home. He raised his head and asked with tenderness, "Is it a Japanese or Western movie?"